How flexible are you? I'm not wondering whether you can touch your toes. I'm actually wondering how flexible you are as a leader. Well, in this time of uncertainty, flexible leadership seems to be a really important skill set. But how can you be a quote unquote flexible leader? And what does that entail? Hear more about that from an expert on the topic, Kevin Eikenberry, when we come back. Hi, I'm Karin Reed. I'm a four-time author, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, and communication expert on helping people to own the room, whether it be a physical one or a virtual one. Welcome to Speaker Dynamics. Kevin Eikenberry, I am so delighted to have you here, and I appreciate your time. It's a busy time for you, correct?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Busy is like the most dangerous four-letter word in the English language. I don't like to use the word. I don't believe in the word. I have a lot that we're working on and I'm excited about. That's true.
Yeah. Well,
I don't like to use the word busy.
I am. That's so interesting. Well, I am alluding to the fact that really within days, you have your most recent book coming out, which is called Flexible Leadership, Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. And you say, at least in your blurb, that you consider to be your best and most important work yet. So I would like to know why you think this is the case.
Well, I did say that. And I also have co-authors on other books. And so they're probably not all that thrilled that I've said that necessarily. They've heard me say it. So two things. One is, Karin, I would like to hope that as I continue to do this work, I'm getting at least a little smarter and hopefully a little wiser. So it would be nice to think that the trend of the quality of work continues to go up and to the right. So part of it, I think, is that. But I think bigger than that, and really more to the reason you asked the question, is that I do think that what I'm sharing here is asking leaders to do something they've not necessarily done, maybe not thought about, but it gives us a chance, I think, to lead at a far more successful and effective level. I do believe that this book has a chance to make a real difference for anybody who will not just read it, but will implement some of the things we're talking about.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this concept of flexible leadership. What do you mean by that? And why would you consider it to be a crucial skill given today's business climate?
Well, I've been in the business of helping leaders for 30 plus years, and I stand on the shoulders of people that have been trying to do that for, 50 years before that, right? And a lot of really smart people built a lot of smart processes and tools to help leaders grow. And one of the things we've done most often is give people assessments and models and styles. And all those things are great because as human beings, we are good at recognizing patterns. And so if we have a pattern and we can identify a style, then that can be helpful and insightful. However, leadership styles stop helping us at some point, and they go from being helpful to being not helpful. And why that is we move from saying this is an useful insight about what my natural approach or my habitual approach would be, to saying this is who I am. And when we move to this is who I am, this is the kind of leader I am, we've now boxed ourselves in from being able to do anything else, Karin. And so in a world that is more uncertain than ever by all sorts of measures, in a world that is asking more of us as leaders than ever before, it seems like folly to think that we can just do it the way we've always done it. And so what I've done with this book is to try to frame for people a new way to think about leadership, which is to think that we can be like a tree. We can be rooted in principles, in values, in mission, but we must be flexible. Just like a tree above the ground's got to be flexible. We've got to be flexible, not in the what, but in the how. And so what we're trying to do is help people think differently about what it means to lead effectively, which means I don't have to be the same and always be completely consistent, but rather be flexible in approach to help us get better results.
Yeah, one of the things that came to mind for me was when I was working with leaders at the beginning of the pandemic, when they couldn't use the playbook that they have used forever, which was, managing by walking around. Well, if you walked around, many buildings were empty, and they had to figure out a new way, a new playbook for the fully virtual world that we lived in. And even as there is this, effort to return to office, there's still a lot of changes in that playbook of being a good leader, a good manager. That inspired me, as you know, to write several books with my co-author, Joe Allen. But did that inspire you to write this book, perhaps? Or was there another?
Not really. I mean, I think that's I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
It's true. Because I wrote a book called The Long Distance Leader before the pandemic, back when Corona was still beer. So people would come to us, and then we were writing during the pandemic, like you, and people would come and say, what's coming? You're supposed to be smart about this. Like, tell us what the future is. And I started to say to people, I know, I don't know a lot, but what I do know is the future will be flexible in terms of what, when, where, and how work gets done. And I think that that's become true. I don't think that was the kind of answer people necessarily wanted. So I think there's a connection, as you described it, right, between what's happening in the evolving work world,
right,
and this book. But the flexibility in this book is more than just about the what and where of work, but about the context in which work sits, the amount of things that we may not know or can't get information about, and yet we still need to make decisions about, the complicated or complex interactions between the members of our team and the other departments, perhaps in our organization, and our suppliers and our customers, and all of that, and the global environment, all that stuff hooked together. So this book isn't just about doing stuff differently because we're hybrid or virtual, but rather about the whole picture of being a leader.
Is there some triggering event that you noticed, from the people you talked to for your book, that caused them to sit back and think, okay, I've got to change what I'm doing. I need to become more flexible. Is there an example that comes to mind of a leader who recognized this and kind of changed what they were doing and adopted a more flexible mindset as a result?
I won't say a person as much as, but I can kind of pinpoint part of what led to the writing of the book. So rather than there being an exemplar, it was more about what I saw in the world. And I hinted at this earlier, like a lot of smart people for a long time, some of whom I know and many of whom I respect and admire and have been mentors to me from afar, have been working for a long time to try to help leaders get better. And lots of people doing the work that we do, trying to help leaders get better. And yet we're not making a lot of progress. And so it caused me to step back and say, why is that? What is keeping us from really helping not just a few leaders in an organization after we trained everybody, but really start to make a shift? And I think there are a couple of things. And one of those is we have to think about it, the whole question, more holistically, thinking about mindset, skill set, and habit set, which is the framework in which the book sits, but also to rethink the model. And the model being, rather than saying, well, this is who I am and this is the way I lead, and I'll tweak around the margins, but rather saying, no, forget about how you lead and think about what the situation calls for, and then giving people a framework to say, okay, if this is the situation, what are some tools that I can use to flex in that moment, to lead more effectively in that moment?
One of the things that I like to do with this podcast is to, kind of put it into a real world situation. Can you walk us through an example?
I sure can. So the back half of the book is about what we call flexors. So there are all sorts of things where most people would say, well, I'm either here or I'm over here. And our perspective here is that it's not one end of the spectrum or the other, but somewhere in the middle. So being a flexible leader is about thinking both and, not either or. So let's take a common example that leaders as communicators find themselves in.
Okay.
Everyone who's listening to this, Karin, has been in this situation. They've actually been in both seats in this situation. Well, let's start it with us as leaders. We walk into a room for a meeting. Maybe it's problem solving or whatever it is, but we walk in and we have a question and we want the group to give us input. Like, there's the situation. What do you all think? What are our options? What should we consider? Something like that. We've all been there. And we ask that question. And then we get that.
Crickets.
Right? We get crickets. And you've been on both sides of this. You've been
Sure.
the leader here and you've been in the room. So when I've asked hundreds of leaders who've been in that situation, honestly, tell me the truth. What's really going through your mind when you do that and you get nothing? And the answers are like, seriously, don't these people care? Why won't they say anything? What is wrong? That's what. Now, are those possible reasons why people don't respond? Yes. Mm-hmm. Are they the only reasons? No. We can come up with, I like to do what I call plausible cause analysis. Like, okay, what are the reasons why people might not be immediately responding? Well, there's like 10 reasons.
Sure.
Right? It could be that they didn't hear the question. Could be they didn't understand the question. Could be that they don't want to go first. Could be that they're still thinking.
Yeah.
Probably the number one answer. Could be that they're not engaged. Could be that they don't care. Could be that they're afraid you already have the answers and what's the point. Could be that they're afraid if they say something, you're going to say, good idea, you're in charge, don't want to be voluntold. Like, we could go right on down the list.
Sure.
So how does that fit into the book? Well, here's where I would say that fits into the book. That there's a flexor that I would say is, should I be talking or should I be asking? Should I be telling? Should I be asking? And in that moment, what most leaders do is start talking. They say, okay, so let me give you a couple ideas to get us started. What's the better answer? Better choice. Ask again. Ask it a different way. Ask it a third way. Even though that might not be your natural inclination, and even though you might be saying, but we got to keep going here. If you really want their input, asking again, asking a different way, pausing a little longer, all of those have a much better chance of getting responses than telling or saying something, right? So a flexor, this is this very simple one, is the flexor between right now, should I be asking or should I be telling?
Yeah.
And there are times when telling is the better answer. There are times when asking is the better answer. The ends of the spectrum are rarely the right answer. The right answer is somewhere in between. Which direction should I be leaning in this moment? And that's one of about 19 or so flexors in the book. And what I challenge people after they read it is, you're going to find a bunch more. I just picked some common ones and ones that people will, I think, in most cases immediately recognize and say, yeah, I get that. Right? And yet these flexors are everywhere when we stop and think about it. And so rather than saying, what should I do? Like, anytime someone asks you a question and you say, well, it depends. Whatever it depends on will impact what approach you would suggest to them, right?
Right.
That right there is at the heart of the idea of being flexible as a leader is, well, it's not just, there's not just an answer. It depends on, tell me more about this, that, or the next thing. Give me a sense of the situation, of the context. Then we can make better decisions.
It seems to me, Kevin, that in order to truly be a flexible leader, that listening would be a critical skill. Because you're talking about how, you can say it depends, but you need to hear more in order to understand how to respond to it. If you're truly trying to solicit input, you need to lean into the silence and be comfortable with that and make others comfortable with the silence in order to pull out the participation. So am I reading this correctly, that listening is really critical here?
100%, and I know that here we're mostly talking about communication. That's why I used a communication kind of example. And yet, if you ask me, what's the most important thing for us as a communicator, it would be listening, asking and listening. Because my audience, the audience of my communication is the most important thing. So until I really have stopped and thought about the audience and what action do I want them to take as a result of this communication, or how do I want them to think or feel as a result of this communication, then that's the ultimate starting point. Too often we start communication as being about, what do I need to tell them? What do I need them to know? Like, what do I need to say? As opposed to, where are they? And how do I get them someplace from where they are? Yeah. And so, I think that without question, listening is critical for us to be a more effective leader. And yet, back to flexors, there's also a time when we need to say something. Like if the context of our situation is one of chaos, they're not wanting you to ask a bunch of questions. They're looking for someone to say, what are we going to do first? What are we going to do right? What do we need to do next? We're stuck. Where do we go? In that moment, we need to say, we're going to go here. As my dad used to say, even if it's wrong. Like, we got to do something, even if it's wrong.
So do you have in the book suggestions on how to analyze which path you should be taking?
100%. Like, that's the whole frame, right? So the whole frame of the book is, what is the context of the situation? We got a framework that's used to do that. And then based on that, in any one of these flexors, which direction ought I be leaning based on what's the situation, what's the nature of or the context of the situation I find myself in? Absolutely. That's hugely helpful. One of the things that you mentioned briefly, but I would love for you to elaborate on is the basic framework where you're talking about the mindset, the skill set, and the habit set. What do you mean by that? I've got the mindset, I think, and probably the skill set, but I'd like to hear it in your words. Sure. So excuse me. So here's the thing. Most leadership development, whether that's organizationally done or for us as individuals, what we say is, what skills do I need? So I'm going to go out and find these skills. I'm going to go. And so if it's in an organization, excuse me, it's about, here's what the training course is going to be. We're going to teach people these skills. Well, if the mindset doesn't match that, it doesn't matter. Like, I could teach people how to look at the context and apply these flexors, but if they don't buy the idea, if their mindset doesn't match, listen, but that's not what this style leader does. Oh, yeah. Or I think leaders ought to be consistent and not flexible. Like, if that mindset doesn't match the skills, it doesn't matter. The skills are intellectual, and that's fine. But if the mindset doesn't match it, it's one of the reasons why investments in leadership development don't work, because we start at the wrong point. We start and say, here's your new toolkit. Yes, I would call that the uncoachable client, where you're wasting your money. Yeah, exactly. So we got mindset, we got skill set, and then we all know that people will take a course, read a book, do nothing. Good idea. Really like it. Don't change anything. So habit set is putting what we've learned or what we know into action. It's closing the knowing, doing gap, if that makes sense. Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So I would envision that you have this framework, and then at the end you say, okay, this is how you apply, and this is how you keep applying, and this is how you analyze whether what you're doing is working. Is that part of the process that people will follow? Awesome. For sure. So I'm a big believer in reflection. So we talk about how to reflect on what's working or what's not working. We talk about how we develop habits, and we lean into some of what the smart folks have taught us about building habits. But we also talk about rituals, which is what are the things that can get us back on track. Habits to me are like individual things, but rituals are the things that kind of take us back and remind us to be intentional about all of it. And so we talk about all of those components of habit set along the way. I love that. You discuss balancing empathy with organizational goals. What's the trick there? And how do you end up not compromising on one or the other? Well, I think that we can always be empathetic, right? We can choose to be empathetic. So let's just take the pandemic, for example. Like, one of the for all of the challenging things that the pandemic brought to our world, including for individuals, of course. Pretty much everybody I know lost someone from COVID, for example. Yeah. So I'm not saying I would ever wish that we would have it again, but there were many silver linings. One of those silver linings is that many leaders became more empathetic. And they they realized that they needed to understand what's going on with people and not just get the work done. And I would guess that most every leader that would reflect on that said, yes, I was more empathetic, got even better results. Mm-hmm. See, that's an example of, it's not an either or, it's a both and. It's not like I'm choosing to be empathetic or I'm choosing to focus on organization results. Where do I need to lean in this moment? So I have a member of my team who lost her adult daughter last year to a car accident. Mm. So where do I need to be leading during that time? And really for a number of months afterwards, I need to be leaning more toward empathy, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Right. So that's like an obvious example. And yet some people would say, yeah, but we got to get the work done. We'll get the work done. And in fact, long-term, we'll get the work done better if we lean one way in that moment rather than the other. And so the idea of being a flexible leader is to say, both can be true. Which direction will I be served by leaning in this moment?
So those who have been listening are buying into this whole concept, Kevin. They're like, yeah, bring it on. Okay. What are some of the challenges, some of the roadblocks that they may encounter as they try to adopt a more flexible leadership style?
Well, there's a ton of them, because what I'm suggesting here is that we be more intentional, which means that we override our natural tendencies, or we override our auto responses, or we override what we believe our identity says we are, because I'm a facilitative leader, or I'm a whatever kind of leader, and, insert anything you want. So the biggest challenge of all is to realize that if context matters, which hopefully I've sold you on the fact that it does.
Yes.
That it forces us to lead outside of our norm, which means that the biggest challenge is stopping the natural response, taking a tick at least to say, okay, what does the situation tell me about how I ought to lead right now, as opposed to this is what I'm going to do. And so anytime you learn a new skill set, we know that there are challenges, right? But I would say that's the biggest one. The biggest one, it does start with mindset. Like, do I get the core idea that says, wait a minute, there's more than one way, and my natural response might be perfect and might not be. I need to stop and look at the context and the situation and decide rather than just acting.
Yeah. I wish I had this conversation with you last week when I made a phone call that was very much part of my amygdala hijack. And I just came at it, rawr, and I probably should have just taken a step back and thought, okay, how's the best way to approach this? And I did not. So that's just such a valuable piece. Just, the manual override of your initial approach response is critical in order to make it work.
Sometimes our natural response ends up being just perfect, just perfectly fine, right? As good as anything else, but not always. Yeah. I'm reminded of, I often have told this story in the context of the best thing to learn about writing better emails. You can learn from Abraham Lincoln, which makes people go freaking out because, of course, Abraham Lincoln didn't have email. But it relates to this point. And so Lincoln, during the Civil War, would get these dispatches from the front, letters from his general, delivered by horseback, right? And he would get these letters, and oftentimes he wasn't very happy with what he got. And he needed to respond to them, and his first response might not have been the best response. So he would get the letters, he would write his response, he would put his responses in his desk drawer, and the next morning he would read them again and decide if that's the letter to send or if he needed to edit the letter. And, I've used that example for years around communication in general, but it gets at the point that I thought of the story because of the way you said made your point. And that is, just take a second. Is that really, and maybe it's a second, and maybe it's just a tick, and maybe it's a breath, and maybe it's 10 minutes, or maybe it's overnight, whatever it is, say, okay, The first thing that you asked me was, so you're busy, right? And I'm like, I don't love that word because it forces us into just acting.
Yeah.
The word busy is not about accomplishment. It's just about activity. And so if we want to live in accomplishment and not activity, it has to be much more intentional rather than just go, 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 go.
Okay, I love that. It's not about accomplishment, it's about activity. I think that's a great way to set your course for this year. And I'm going to attempt to do that. I know we're a little bit into the year, but I think that's a good New Year's resolution that I'm going to start today. So as we move into 2025 and beyond, how do you see the role of flexibility evolving in leadership?
I think it's going to become more critical, right? Whether you talk about it sort of technically the way we've been talking about it in the book, or if you just want to take the general term of are leaders going to have to flex and adapt? Well, only if they want to be successful, right? So I think that the trend is up and to the right on the need for flexibility, the need for us to be adaptable, the need for us to be agile, the need for us to be more intentional about the way in which we lead, rather than just going based on our inclination, experience, and habit.
So we are coming to a close for our conversation. It went so quickly, Kevin, but one of the things that I always ask my guests is to provide one big takeaway for our audience to think about until the next episode. Do you have one that is springing to mind?
Sure. The next time someone asks you something or you ask yourself something and your answer is, it depends, stop and think about what it depends upon and use that context to help you make an intentional decision about what action, decision, or communication you will go to next. Don't just go to automatic. Don't oversimplify it. Nothing I just said to overanalyze it either, but it is to say, because we say that to ourselves, like, well, it depends. What does it depend on? List those things out. With that new perspective, what's your best course of action that best addresses all of those considerations?
Nothing is in a silo. Nothing is in a vacuum. Make sure you assess the context, and it'll make you a more flexible leader and a more effective leader. Kevin, if people want to get in touch with you, if they want to work with you more, learn more, what can they do? How can they get to you beyond this podcast?
Well, if they can figure out how to spell my name, they can find
it's
me.
in the show notes.
Yeah, you can find me anywhere. KevinEikenberry.com. You can find me. You can follow me on LinkedIn, all that stuff. We'd love to have you do that. If you're interested in the book, you can go buy the book anywhere, you buy your books. Flexible Leadership. But because I've been on the show with you, Karin, and I've been excited to be on, I've had you on my show where I got to interview you, but now I get to see a real expert interviewer. And so I've learned so much from that. So because of that, we've created a special gift for all of your listeners. And so if people go to kevineikenberry.com/gift, all the information about the book will be there, how you can buy a copy, buy multiple copies, the bundle options and all those things. But we're giving you access to our masterclass that I created about leading with confidence and instilling confidence in others. And so that's our gift to all of you. Confidence is one of the ideas in the book. So the masterclass is yours for having been here. Just go to kevineikenberry.com/gift. Hope you'll do that. Obviously, hope you'll buy a book as well. But if you'll start there, we'd love to give that gift to you.
I love that confidence comment because, Kevin, I know you label yourself the Chief Potential Officer. I label myself the Chief Confidence Creator. So it's absolutely on brand. Kevin Eikenberry, congratulations on your most recent book, Flexible Leadership. And thank you so much for sharing some of the insights from that book with our listeners today.
It's been my pleasure to be with you. Thanks, Karin.
Thank you. During this time of constant change, I think we're all looking for answers on how to be better leaders in this very uncertain world. And that's why I feel like Kevin's most recent book is going to be so valuable to so many of us. And certainly his words of wisdom that he had during my conversation with him today were also valuable for me and hopefully for you as well. And guess what? We have more, because one of the things that Kevin didn't get to talk about is the role of confidence when it comes to being a flexible leader. And as somebody who is the chief confidence creator at Speaker Dynamics, I jumped at the chance to dive into that topic. So if you want to hear it, you can check out the mini episode by going to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content. Once again, it's speakerdynamics.com/bonus content. And you can hear an important conversation about confidence and flexible leadership and how you can achieve both. I want to thank you all for your support of this podcast. You've given me confidence to continue for the second year in a row with Speaker Dynamics Own the Room. If you have liked what you have heard, please pass it along to your colleagues, to your family, to your friends, and let's continue to build this community here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Until next time.